디나는 아주 사사리 이게세 셰비에 된데 가르스나 사사게는 요 소수이디 용게 용어요 봐 배난제 는배 봐 지울을 띄우 이제 라다 유교들 망고지 봐 근데 아주 요 지게를 된지나 용 참고요 나 봐 대제 뒤에는 비 그런 다 공주시 유제제 대제 수요
So the reason we emphasize on the Lhasa written language, spoken language, rather than Lhasa dialect, is because within Lhasa dialect there are a lot of variants. Because when they are not based on the proper pronunciation of the word, you see different pronunciations used even for one item. For example, for rice, within Lhasa population, some people said de, some people said bear, because some missing the certain syllables. Likewise, for monkey, in Lhasa, some people said biu, or some people said diu. So the latter one, diu, is more written spoken language. And for that reason, we emphasize that in our document.
근데 총도기 제정도 정말 다다다 영어조 제제 예용 배지게 리제 총도 제정 초지세 등의 대들이 소주 차시래. 근데 총도 gen크가 영 말을 두게.
So all the papers that we presented at the seminar will later be compiled into a book, and actually I'm taking that responsibility. My office in Beijing is currently compiling and collecting these papers, and we would publish it soon under a title, the National Tibetan Language Standardization Work.
근데 일반은 예산이 또는 그 외계는 디 민다 다체 서바 다체 대주 최대 진도 소주 디 된다.
So far I have been discussing on the pronunciation of the standardization of the pronunciation of a Tibetan word, and from now on I will discuss on the standardization of the terminologies, which I think is very important for standardizing the Tibetan language.
근데 디나는 연남된 민 같은 두성기. 디는 가르스나 당 아주 민만 외박이 디나는 민당 민마게 디치도. 디나는 요 기준 매버든데 도와. 내가 디 자치 디 사실 지수는 미지바든데 대를 못 보여. 대공도 디 개개인기 서다촌의 디 깔래 커버 시도 소비 두고사. 가르스나 개개인지게 코란 자치 지지 코란지 캘링 디여봐. 개개인 지게 디 현시게 왕 코란디 뇌버 제가 근데 지지여봐. 근데 서다도 내 지지양 요 지고디 디 개개인이 파수제 용 출주. 다 도시제제 디 서다도 강에 디 배치무 소비 두고사.
And in terms of the terminologies, the standard terminologies, we also are facing a problem. This is because although there's a standard terminologies in terms of Tibetan verbs and so on, again there are still varieties. For example, the use of Tibetan verbs. Sometimes there is a variety, and so a teacher who follows certain traditions will later be again seen as a mistake by another teacher, and this creates a problem for the student when they're using certain verbs. And for this purpose, I feel it's really important to have a standard terminology. I feel it would be easier to come up with a standard in terms of existing words, including verbs, nouns, so on. It may not be that complicated. I think a vast challenge that we face is for developing or creating new terminologies. when there's a lack of the standard criteria, that may be, I think, much harder.
근데 디고 나주 로주 돌레잖아 디 냠뉴 메바 말에 가르스나 나주 뉘마 디 깨제 핑송 제바데 근데 나주 베기 디 대뒤 살도 다르디 타니에다 근데 다체도 저 지주 당에 나주 뉘마는 메보 담바 남바트 나주 디베 제제 야버지 샤차여죠 나주 베 야버 된여.
If you look at the history of Tibetan language and its reform history, the Tibetans gone through a lot of reform. Our ancestors already carried out 3 reforms for Tibetan language. And if you look at that work, we already have some kind of example or precedent. And therefore, I think it's possible that we could follow this precedent and come up with a good reform.
근데 다지도 고장가 줄로네서 나주 중국 사바대 주제서는 베리 기초대야 뇌매게 다조 나주 남바 상제区域的 삼바 인베게디 삼배 조송비 기초대네 다 휴만 군족 삼배 조송비 기초대 주로도 전부 되는지 중요해.
좀 가슴 나고 상계를 지도하는
이제 군족 다 수수
상종 되면서
마지막에 수수 지당 미색 지당 미缺乏明白.
Oh, that's secular. So, if you look at the history of China itself, there's a huge transformation since 1950s. You would see the birth of New China. At the same time, for Tibetan community, changed from a very religious or the sacred culture into a very secular culture.
근데 인상은 베리 사크다 근데 장아 반 된제와 근데 제망의 진여와 대제도 근데 나로 사크게 근데 나리네 인한다 근데 시제 인한다 사바 망보지 근데 찰시 변조 근데 체리 대주기 근데 시제 망보지 별디 바 로기여래.
Because of this new transformation, the interaction between Chinese and Tibetan has become much more closer and much more constant. And as a result, the new knowledges, new subjects are being introduced in Tibetan culture, including political, economic, and other fields.
디게 지주 땅에 연결做的 양 베이징 미리베르 칸데 투데요.
Because of this constant exchange between Chinese and Tibetan, and one started seeing a need for translation work. And this task is given to Beijing Nationalities publication where I work.
근데 대뒤 딱 미리베르 칸나는 되는 양아주 노위 칸송기 개발만 보지 기반 정제 공조 가르스나 다 사바르와 강가르디 시작 한번더 사바인데 근데 공조이기 데미지 수에다들 참하게 캐는 거예요. 이제 공조에 다 그런도 주의제제 실화제 제가 실화제예요.
아니 이게
이주고 치도 제가 실화제예요.
And at the time, the Beijing Nationalities publication invited scholars from different regions, from Tibetan regions, and asked them to create a standard in terms of translation work. And the scholars basically did a lot of debate, and they came up with a standard or guideline for translation work. In one of the last news letter, they did a review on a new publication of a book on terminology. There are about 3 volumes. Lazi actually reviewed that book. And you would see in that work the work of Great Master Shirk Gyatso and others developing this terminology and standard.
现在第一学过的开始呢，每个标准康的对标准节个基本菜个嘛的，可能连接的，研究的那偏轻不远的，研究节的偏轻不远的。
And so if you look at the work of Nationalities publication, the Beijing Nationalities publication, it's not just a publication work. We've done tremendous translation work as well.
在那的毛泽东的宋庄纪律写的，在那马克思恩格斯共产的宋庄，在那的共产党的赵党写的了，在那大众的学嘛的中国党军对吧？中国党军，在对了的，他这的改造恰当吧？ 在做他们的研究的在郑州经验的，他们的每日标准康健。
And as you see, when there's a lot of translation work need to be done, we have been coordinating all this translation work. You have seen the collected work of Mao Zedong, the work of Marx and Engels, including the Declaration of Communism. And that these are all translated into Tibetan, and we have been coordinating that work. Another, I think, well-known work, translation work, was the Chungwa Damgyu, the story of Marshall, the heroes. This is a very well-known Chinese the epic, and we translated it, and the Tibetan people received it very well.
这个每日标准康，这个恰见这几月是吧？这几月这另外一个的。 他像研究那个应用在做学当姐姐，这学嘛，像加倍现在的成绩，就学的，另外起的他人学的，另外个在成绩在嘛地方，对对对，俺了季节，在古旧了季节，在起人学的。
And because of our constant translation work, we also started working on a dictionary, a bilingual dictionary. Tibetan Chinese, Chinese Tibetan, because we have this resource and experience. And you would see in 1975 we published a dictionary on Tibetan Chinese. Later we did a more extensive one, a Chinese Tibetan dictionary in 1990s.
真的对于他成绩，假如现在成绩在做，第一呢，他卷到挪出的月的，第学嘛的三千毛个短的月的，以内啊大。 的别个啥家了，别就接做的嘞，可能的卷可是越南的做的，他们的开那个月，等于俺用看那个俺就你嘛，工作对中秋局的局长选拔，忘记了俺开发用件，但对俺就干这钱呐，可能大家的六百当团个月的啥，但对俺就所举的讲解。
Although there's many shortcomings in our translation work, especially on dictionary work, it's still, I think, one of the most used dictionary in Tibetan communities, and we wanted to improve it. Just before I left Beijing, I got a call from Mr. Wang Chuk, who works for the Tibetan Editing Board in TIR. And he wanted to talk about improving this Chinese Tibetan dictionary work, and we are continuing discussion, and hopefully we can again start working on the dictionary.
现在他对于刚才那就给一百亿的300的做就业了，比我这全部其他月嘛这。
And because of these works, accumulated works. We feel confident that we will be able to do a good translation and work on the terminology because of the experience that we had.
但是几个家族老年松，几个国家家族老年松，但是他的中国南路了，就关键是等着，就觉得我也等着去，签约了吧，但是。 对，这觉得等那就啥家干啥干了，等别的啥家人那依旧来空忙不足月的，等那茶巴的康那等那江浙康那大陆地区嘛的年轻，就说他们来空啥巴忙不足月
的。Since 1980s, this new policy on opening and reform policy in China we are able to start working on the Tibetan language more. For example, we have opened a lot of offices of translation bureaus in different regions, as well as the medias, newspaper, broadcasting, and television, so on, are able to broadcast in Tibetan language as a result of that reform policy.
等那联控蒙博用的，等那地方没那忙着签约的，等那没那得罪难了，他依旧忙不过的吧？得到他们的依旧过的，得阶段呢，等那康中忙着的，等那点点从康中忙着的。
And because of the need for more people working in these Tibetan translation bureaus and the media offices, so on, and you started having more people working in the translation. As a result, there's a more, I think, a problem emerging because lack of standard or standardization, and people started kind of using different terms, so on.
ngari kije andole yuna mi chame di koran yige de na chame ha go yere se de di gini chu la song yero wa da shuma de je di konju kanje san yu di konju be yi di nge kinye je kong de se da konju kanje san yu di jubi di yi cha de cholo ro di chame ha go min do se sa.
And yes, because of this, I think more people coming, the lack of regulations, you started seeing some kind of lapse in the standard. If you remember the great Amdo scholar Gendun Chupe, he said, in the past, when the great translators do their translation work, if someone wrote something in Tibetan in Ngari prefecture, and then if you take this to Amdo, people still would understand without any problem. But these days, when there's a lapse of standard, one example is the Kanzik, the Tibetan newspaper. Some of the reporters are carrying out a report in Tibetan on newspaper, and people outside of Kanzik wouldn't understand what they're writing about, because now you see these lapses.
di na yu di na zu yi ju le kong na yu di zhong yang de yi ju ju na na lian su na ben ju de ju na zu ge gen de kong na zu mo che de ba de na zu de ju de ji ju di ya ge ge se ne hong guan tiao kong se na zu ju de ji ko dang zhen se ju ye ji ko se hong guan se da ji ko da ji de ba ni ma di na zu qing zui na de ji de zuo de ji ye qie tong se ji ye hong guan se de qie tong 微观是插通是，等待几句的，但是嘛，出水节，人说那边就出水节，几个当真是等待几水的，但俺就高端的吹不着等待几月的，人那什么的北京茶巴康来才对，茶巴康的工作的我这个是，要不都读啥的，就当要不读，人那俺最得看那个没啥。
And another example of different opinions toward a translation word. It's read very early when we were working with the great translator Mr. Sunam Penjo, and we were translating a Chinese term, and it's the framework, right? Micro management, right?
Micro
adjustment. And when we translate that as a jikok, with Sunam Benjo's help, and later when this paper was presented in TAR, they would not agree with the term, and they would say, well, it sounds quite okay, but we're not going to accept that term. And so you see that the difficulties in terms of using a standard term is emerging.
maybe the net the something was right. They then I do what message the Koran the Kaya matter. That was I do the Icha, very you do the Icha, so the Memon Twin so Chenda, the Twin on the some I get Joker, control, control 大队一能着，现在俺就先把俺就打单过去工作拉地的，到时候强把工作给他解决没给你最这个通勤被其他结构打打。
And so, as I gave you example, due to lack of a standard terminology, a problem started emerging, and this is, common. For example, the Tibetan deputies, when they attend the Chinese National Deputies Conferences, and they also face similar problem because they have to rely on the translation work and translators. And therefore, the Mr. Raptik, who's the head of the National People's Deputies, as well as other the important leaders now started paying attention on a better standard or standardization of the translation of Tibetan terminology.
Yeah, then Shirati Shalom Hajum, Dina, Dangeti, not to pay 10 dedicated shui. Then Shumata Dana do Deti Soviet, be 10% Sabbath Deti Soviet. The Dada Gento Yankee. Dina, then I do Dada Chachil Masuna, see Pete Chidjana, Yinru Halan Chido Donchani Tade, the Deti Chachi. They did the dinner the retain the Chije. But they soon do them, they should not and some of the young that did not yet, and that's what you test. Or soon do, number soon do that on the retain Chije, they take home you had nothing for it.
And so just wanted to, before conclude, I wanted to talk about the new project that we are working right now. We're working on a new Tibetan dictionary, which would involve about 30 volumes and of the terminologies and words. And we're hoping initially we do a very detailed one, and then later we can divide them by sections or subjects.
Yeah, that is
Thank you.